In honor of the newest Captain America movie, Brave New World, here's my ranking of all the live-action Captain America movies and series, going back all the way to 1944. Before I hop into the ranking, keep in mind that this is just my opinion. Share how you'd rank all of these in the comments section down below, and without any further ado, let's hop right into it. Coming in last place is the TV Captain America movie from 1979, and if you don't know anything about this movie, it's actually way worse than it sounds. Basically, this is a very low budget TV movie from the 70s that is very dated from the soundtrack and the way people talk. But aside from that, this is actually a film that just completely misunderstands the character of Steve Rogers. It feels like the filmmakers had never actually read a Marvel comic, because Steve's personality in this is just completely different. He's very reluctant to take the serum, which, by the way, in this movie, it doesn't take place during World War II. It just takes place in the then modern times, which is the 70s, and it does kind of establish that Steve has a background in the military. That's pretty much the only similarity to his comic book counterpart. And so in this movie, he doesn't even take the serum until it's over halfway through. Boring! And when he finally does become Captain America, the suit just looks awful. And so much of this movie is just people flying in a helicopter or driving a car or a motorcycle. And it'll go on for like 5 minutes where no one even talks and they're just driving something. They literally just had to do that because there wasn't enough story to pad out the runtime. And despite the fact that the story is very short, it still feels underdeveloped. And the villains in here are extremely forgettable. I honestly can't even remember what they were even up to. So this is a movie that is just beyond underwhelming in every single way. Coming in at number 8 is the 1944 Captain America serial. And this is actually a very interesting case where it came out just a couple of years after the character was created in the comics. But despite that, they actually changed the character from Steve Rogers to this district attorney named Grant Gardner. And basically Captain America is his alter ego. And so he's essentially just more like Batman and he's crime fighting. And for what it is, it's alright. It actually has a pretty decent villain. And when you compare it to other serials that were coming out in this time period, it does have some pretty impressive action, and it also feels like they put the budget to good use when it came to all the unique locations they filmed at. It's still definitely nothing great by today's standards, but for a time period where a lot of these iconic heroes were first starting to appear in these serials, this is definitely one of the better ones.
I mean, it's alright, like...
Coming in at number 7 is Captain America 2 Death Too Soon, the sequel to the 1979 movie, which also came out in 1979. And this is yet again another low budget made for television film, but at least unlike the first film, this actually had a more comic accurate costume, which was teased at the end of the first film, and it also understood that you have to have more Captain America action. So this is just much more watchable, less boring. It has a more memorable plot where the villains are trying to de-age people with the serum. And the craziest thing about this movie is you actually have Christopher Lee playing the main villain.
Impossible.
And so at the end of the day, this is without a doubt a huge improvement over the first 1979 film. But at the same time, that definitely doesn't mean that this is great. Coming in at number 6 is the 1990 Captain America movie. And this is actually a really interesting movie where they actually did not release it in theaters in the United States. It just went direct to video. But when it comes to this movie, unlike the 1944 serial and the TV movies from the 70s, this was actually a comic-accurate version of Steve Rogers, where he is this person that volunteers to take the serum because no matter what, he always wants to do the right thing. And I do appreciate that this film mostly relies on practical effects and that kind of stuff, because this definitely was an era where VFX was starting to become an option. A lot of movies from then used them and they did not age well. But just overall, when it comes to this movie, while to get Captain America right, and even Red Skull in this movie is actually kind of compelling, most of the side characters in here are not really great. And this is actually a movie that had quite a bit of studio interference, where originally the director wanted the World War II parts of the film to take place in flashbacks, just in multiple points in the movie, but instead they changed it to where it's just all at the beginning of the film. And there actually is a guy on YouTube that was able to see the director's cut of the film, and I'm definitely hoping that they're going to be able to release that for everyone to see. So at the end of the day, a lot of people call this the worst Captain America film, and while it's not great, I think those people haven't seen the 70s TV movies. Coming in at number 5 is the Falcon and Winter Soldier series, and even though Captain America isn't in the title of this until the very end, I figured I should include this because these two main characters were introduced in the Captain America movies, and Sam Wilson turning into the new Captain America is kind of a huge plot point in this. But regardless, when it comes to this show, I think this is kind of underrated and better than some of the stuff Marvel has been putting out recently. but nonetheless it is a deeply flawed show as well. Just a lot of the writing here wasn't great.
You've got to do better, Senator. You've got to step up.
The plot twist that Sharon Carter was the power broker was so obvious. I don't think what they did with the Flag Smashers as the villains was necessarily great either. And so this is a series where I feel like it didn't reach its potential just in a lot of regards. But to its credit, it does have some pretty good lead characters and some exciting action. Coming in at number 4 is Captain America: Brave New World. I think all the characters that were introduced in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier were actually improved upon in this film. They were more memorable. Plus, what they do with Sam Wilson is better. All the character arcs here were actually done really well. I think the leader makes for a very compelling villain. You have Sidewinder as a side villain. And of course, you have Thaddeus Ross, played by Harrison Ford this time, who's just a very compelling character. And it's really cool at the end of the movie how he transforms into the Red Hulk, because it's been a while since we've had any Hulk do that amount of destruction. Now, I do understand some of the criticisms in regards to the villains, where because there's 3 of them, they have to share the spotlight. But in my opinion, since none of them are killed off, I find it acceptable because I think they all fit well into the story and we know we can see them in the future. And a lot of people have also been complaining that you can tell where all the reshoots are and that kind of stuff. But to be completely honest, while there are some moments here and there where you kind of can, I was actually pretty impressed with how they did in covering it up. And so this is a movie that I just overall really enjoyed and thought it was pretty well made. It's definitely not flawless. The soundtrack isn't anything too great. There's some CGI in here that isn't that good. And with all these characters, it probably could have been a little bit longer for sure, but just at the end of the day, I think this is much better than a lot of people on the internet are making it out to be. I think it's certainly one of the best MCU movies in recent years. Coming in at number 3 is Captain America: The Winter Soldier, and this right here is a phenomenal movie. If anything, people are probably going to be mad that I did not put it at number 1, and I promise you I have nothing against it. I just think the other 2 are better, which we'll get to. But when it comes to this movie, I think it's great how we get to have a deeper look at Steve Rogers adapting to the modern world, because there was some of that in the Avengers, but because there were other heroes in the spotlight, we didn't get to see too much of it. And here he just has a really good character arc, as obviously he kind of has a new purpose in the modern world. And of course, the whole plot line regarding Hydra being inside of S.H.I.E.L.D. is just really well executed. The writing is really good. Alexander Pierce is a great villain. All the side characters in here like Nick Fury and Black Widow are great. Of course, this introduced Sam Wilson as the Falcon as well.
Don't say it. Don't you say it. Left. Come on!
And obviously, you have the Winter Soldier in here who turns out to be Bucky Barnes. And it's pretty impressive how they were able to pull off the twist just in a very cool way, despite the fact that most people would have already known that from the comics and previous forms of media. And because of Steve's connection to him, that makes it harder for him to decide what to do at the end of the movie. But the final battle overall is just phenomenal. It's very large in scale. It's very exciting. Coming in at number 2 is Captain America: The First Avenger, and this is probably the most underrated MCU film in my opinion. The origin story here for Captain America is just absolutely perfect. I think the vintage 1940s vibe is great. It's an awesome setting for the film. I also think Red Skull was very well adapted from the comics. He's one of the more underrated MCU villains. This of course has all the action and romance and all the stuff you would want from this type of movie. And just at the end of the day, this was a great introduction to the character of Captain America. Chris Evans just did a great job in the role. But coming in at number 1 is Captain America: Civil War, which in my opinion is actually more of an Avengers movie. But whatever you want to call it, there's no denying that this is a great movie.
It was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
The whole idea is kind of about dealing with the consequences of all the destruction that the Avengers have caused in previous movies, and it's just a very compelling narrative where the Avengers are being torn apart. And there's obviously valid reasons to be on both sides, because on one hand you do kind of want some government interference with superheroes. It's probably not the best to just have them roam around without any restrictions, but at the same time, in the context of this movie, you have General Ross kind of pulling the strings. Actually, Zemo's the one that's really pulling the strings, and so there's some corruption involved in here. And also considering the fact that the Avengers have saved the world a couple of times, who would have thought that would have served as proof that they didn't need government restrictions? And so the conflict in here was just built up very well. And this is a movie that once it gets going, the excitement does not stop. All the characters in here are great. And this just has some top tier sequences like the airport sequence in the final battle, which is just between Bucky, Steve, and Iron Man. So I think out of all the movies on this list, this works the best on a character level and an emotional level. And of course, there's no denying that this has some top tier action as well. But overall, that was my ranking of all the live action Captain America movies and series. Again, share how you'd rank them in the comments section down below. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.